Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, hi everyone. We will start within 10 minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, Welcome to today's panel discussion on the topic Queering Higher Education, organized by Chintabar and in collaboration with Vannam. For the new people, Chintabar is a student collective of IIT Madras who engages in discussion on socially, economically, and politically relevant topics and have been active on campus for around 10 years. Chintabar conducts talks, panel discussions, and reading sessions, etc., with the aim to create a democratic space within IIT Madras and make the students more responsible and sensitive to the larger issues of the nation and the world. And Vannam is a queer support and resource group of IIT Madras that stands as a platform for providing support and a safe and inclusive space to the queer community and their allies on campus. Vannam has been actively engaging with the community through various events such as Pride Parade, Carnival, etc., and has been at the forefront of facilitating conversations and challenging the taboo surrounding queer issues on campus. I am Punya and I'm honored to moderate this panel discussion. As we virtually gather here today, it is a privilege to celebrate and honor Pride Month. It is a time dedicated to recognize the resilience, diversity, and contributions of the LGBTQIA+ community. It is also a powerful reminder of the triumphs and struggles of those who have fought and continue to fight and for equality, acceptance, and love. On this occasion, as we celebrate the strides we have made towards inclusive academic environments, it's equally important to recognize the work that lies ahead. This conversation is particularly relevant because discrimination is a reality for many on campus, and queer individuals face unique challenges further compounded by intersecting identities. Queering higher education would mean transforming our institutions in a way that tackles all these inequalities and creating institutions that are welcoming and supporting for everyone, irrespective of their gender identities or sexual orientation. Today, we have a distinguished panel who will share their insights and experiences on the topic. I welcome Chayanika Shah, a writer, activist, and educator. She is a member of the Forum Against Suppression of Women and has been part of many feminist campaigns since the 80s. She has been active in the queer rights movement since 1995 as a member of LABIA, a queer feminist LBT collective. Currently, she is part of Hasrat-e-Zindagi Mamuli. Her work as an activist and academician is at the intersection of science, feminism, and queer rights, and has involved a critique of science's control over women's bodies and sexualities. She has authored several influential books, including We and Our Fertility, The Politics of Technological Intervention, and No Outlaws in the Gender Galaxy, etc. Welcome, Chayanika Shah. Uh,
Thank you, Punya.
Next on the panel, we have Gourab Ghosh, a queer rights activist, educator, and theatre artist. Ghosh was actively involved in student politics and is currently working as an assistant professor of literature and culture at Jyoti Dalal of Liberal Arts, NMIMS University. His work is focused on literature, cultural studies, gender and sexuality, and performance studies. Welcome, Gourab Ghosh.
Hello, Vannam.
Okay, we will begin with a panel and have a Q&A session after the discussion, and we encourage everyone to actively participate in the same. On to the panel.
Hi, so I'll start. If any of you can switch on your videos, it will be useful. If you can't, it's fine. But it's nice to see some responses as we speak. So I have to speak. We decided that we speak for 20 minutes each, and then we'll open it out for discussion. 20 minutes is not a very long time. And I want to quickly lay down actually the issue of what is higher education and then come to what does it mean when we say queering higher education. So to begin with, just to in very many broad strokes, to speak about the higher education space as a space that was open to only a few for very long. It is a space where knowledge is generated, valid knowledge is generated, and valid I'm putting in quotes because there are knowledge is generated in many spaces, but this is considered as a space where knowledge is generated and you learn how to participate in the process of knowledge formation. So in that sense, it is very peculiar, the higher education space. And if you look at the history of India, Then pre-independence, we have a period much before colonialization. You have a period of something like the gurukuls, which are very, very limited in who they give access to reading and writing, and who is considered worthy enough of creating knowledge. And it's very much determined by the caste system, and it's determined by the gender of the person. So it is only the Brahmin male able-bodied person who's seen as somebody who inhabits a knowledge creation space. When we come to the colonial period and we look at the rise of the modern university, we find there's some amount of democratization by the time these universities come to India. But the antecedents also lie in the rich, the ruling class, the whites, the male kind of being occupying these spaces. Either they came from feudal systems, they were landlords, and so they came from very higher classes and they had the time to do this work, or they came from the clergy. And so you again have a very restrictive kind of access to the system of the university itself. When by the time the university started in India, it actually became something that had the possibility of democratization, because now traditional modes of restrictions could be broken in the university system. By the time the university arrived in India, the universities in the West had opened up to women, they're not opened up to people from other races. But when the imagination of India happened post the independence, then thanks to the initiatives by Dr. Ambedkar and many others like the Fules before that, the effort at democratizing education and making education a tool of transformation is something that we see seeping into the higher education spaces. And so we find that the public funded university spaces, which continued from 1940s, they started before 1947, but continued right up to the 1990s as being spaces that were publicly funded, that were technically open to everybody, where measures had been taken so that people could be included. So there's affirmative action that's taken for people who come from marginalized castes, that come from tribal communities, that come from far-flung regions of the country. And there were also measures taken to include women into those spaces. And so we have this kind of space where you have people from all religions, castes, more or less represented in the university space. And probably for many of us as adults, or as we become young adults, this is the first time that we face a space within which there are many different kinds of people that are present. School education should also have been one such space. Neighborhoods should have been some such spaces where you have all kinds of people living around you. But over the period of time, you see that neighborhoods have become ghettoized. Schools have become more or less people of the same class, caste, etc. go to a certain kind of school. The variation within that is limited. But when we came to the public university system, when we came to the higher education institution, we also came in as near adults or almost adults, and came to a space that was very different, diverse, and full of different kind of people. And this is seen, in my opinion, and having been somebody who's studied and taught and been in the university campuses for a very long time, I think that this is a privilege for whoever can get it, and it should be a privilege that should be offered to as many people as possible. This possibility of moving from a life where you're not working to moving towards a life where you're working, and I know when I say this that a large number of people start working very early in life, but I'm talking of those of us who are privileged enough to actually do education as our main work for most parts of our young lives. For that section of people, this became a place where we become adults, where we are somewhere in an in-between space. The campus is an in-between space where we become adults, so we have a little less control from our parents, from our families, and we are moving towards, we have not yet got into the responsibilities of the adult world in the same fashion as we do once we exit the campus. And I'm adding many caveats as I go along, that I'm not generalizing. I know that higher education spaces and my classrooms for the longest time had people who are working and studying at the same time. And yet I feel that the college space, the campus space, is a time that that young adult gets who's working for 6 hours outside and then coming to the classroom, but still gets a space where they're able to interact with different kinds of people and hence grow as people themselves. Now, this is a constant source of tension, because on the one hand, you want people to succeed in the system outside. On the other hand, education is a space that's supposed to create a criticality in you, in how you understand the world, and it also has a transformative potential. So you should be able to look at the world in a particular manner critically and be able to change it. So now this is the frame within which we are coming to higher education. What we find here then is that the antecedents of these being very male dominated, not only male dominated, but also dominated by other social cultural privileges, socio-economic and cultural privileges. Only those men were occupying these spaces. So naturally, as people came in, there is tension. There is tension when people from different caste backgrounds come in. Then there's the whole question of merit that is asked, and it is continued to be asked in spite of the fact that we know that merit is not an absolute term. It comes from our social cultural locations. When we bring in Adivasi communities, then there is a kind of mainstreaming of Adivasi knowledges and Adivasi lifestyles. When we bring in people with disabilities, then there's the whole question of ability. That very recently, that people with disabilities have started telling us that ability is as socially constructed, and just because I cannot see or cannot hear does not mean that I lack in abilities. There are different kinds of abilities, and all of these need to be recognized, and which in an education space should be something that should be respected. When women came in, and I'm still speaking only of women and men in the binary genders, when women came in, then there was this whole thing of, they came in also conditionally as needing protection. And somewhere this needing protection is somewhere inherent in our campus spaces. So you have what results because of that. What results because of that is that we have the imagination of a campus as a very heterosexual and homosocial space. So you're allowed, the hostels are constructed like that, all infrastructure is like that, all rules are like that. Much of our teaching presumes this. Much of our disciplines also presumes this. And in today's discussion, today's presentation, I won't have time to go into that. But I think that that's also another area to look at as to how we teach and what we teach, and what does it do to maintain this kind of the normalcy of the heterosexual and the homosocial. So you can share rooms with two women can share a room, two boys can share a room, etc. All of this is in their heads, but at the same time, a cis man and a cis woman can never share a room unless they are married, and there is provision for a married students hostel. So in this imagination, then we've imagined the whole student population to be heterosexual and homosocial. And this I repeat these terms over and over again, because there is no space for homosexuality as much as there is no space for heterosociality. So you lack on friendships between cis men and cis women. Friendships become tenuous, friendships become stressful, friendships become laden, or they're assumed to be, there's assumed to be an underlying sexual tension. And on the other hand, if there are homosexual persons within the space, then they are subjected to ridicule, they're subjected to being seen as the other, and they're subjected to being seen as the problematic in this space. So when you have a masculinist, and this I'm referring to the earlier part of what I spoke, that the space is seen as occupied by white or Brahmin, upper class, able-bodied men, and then it is bringing in others. It is trying to socialize the others into ways that we fit into what I am calling a masculinist dramatical structure that the university has. Some of it has definitely over the years transformed itself. Some of it has been pushed by people who've come in. Some of it has been altered. But nonetheless, at the base is this understanding. And this we have to keep in mind when we try to understand what do we mean by queering higher education then. So when we talk of queering, when we talk of queer bodies coming into a space like this, when we are talking of queer and trans bodies, and I don't know how much, since I don't know how many of you are from the humanities and how many of you are from science and technology backgrounds, because the conversation on gender and sexuality itself is much nuanced today from inclusion of queer trans realities into that conversation. So we moved from an essentialist body-based description of gender and sexuality to saying that there is something that is inherent about gender and sexuality, but there is also a lot that is socially constructed. And we're not putting one against the other. We are saying both of these are part of how gender and sexuality operate in each of our lives and how gender and sexuality operate in the world at large. So within this, when queer and trans bodies come in, when there's such a binary understanding of gender, can you imagine what it means for anybody who is not really transgressing gender boundaries, but is even playing around with those gender boundaries? How does the campus respond to that? How does the classroom respond to that? How does the hostel respond to that? Is there a way in this campus that this kind of transgression can be accommodated? Or is there a constant presence of a choice to be made by the queer trans individual of what battle do I want to fight today, and hence how do I present myself to the world at large today? How much do I express myself? How real am I to myself? How true am I to myself? And this tussle is an added tussle, much like the added tussle that every Dalit student faces, because there's constantly a question on their performance, on their meritoriousness, and much that a person with disability might face, because there's constantly an assumption of lack of ability on their part. So I'm saying that this tension, although we are speaking only of gender and sexuality just now, I feel that this is a tension that percolates all margins that come into the space, or all those people who've been excluded from the space and who come in here. The complication in gender and sexuality is that since women were earlier entrants and women were assumed to be cisgender and assumed to be heterosexual, and men at that time were assumed similarly, that the whole notion of the student population is divided, is binarized so much and segregated so much in terms of where the girls are and where the boys are. And girls and boys, obviously in quotes. The girls are usually segregated. They are usually also put under more control than the boys are put. That all of it is meant for their protection. And now what does this kind of protectionist understanding of gender and sexuality do to a queer individual is a question that you should ponder over and think about. How does it affect a person when there is such segregation in various ways, in dress codes, in expression, and in infrastructure, in rules, and in classrooms and teaching pedagogies? This is an open question, and I think that when we start looking at queering higher education, all of these need to be looked at. But this, you cannot confine it only to this. And that's where my second bit comes in, that, as an individual, when I'm coming, as a queer trans individual, when I'm coming to a campus, it is also space where I'm going to start experimenting if my family has not allowed me that space. My schools and much of our work that I've done with other people on looking at lives of queer and trans individuals, I find schools very restrictive because they have a uniform. They teach you to be a good boy or a good girl. And so there are lots of restrictions, and many queer trans individuals actually drop out of schools, or as Nirantar, the study that Nirantar did would say, or Nazaria did, would say that they're pushed out of the school system. They're pushed out of the school system because they're asked to become like everybody else, and the inability to become like everybody else actually pushes them out of the system. Those of us who survive, because of other privileges, because of many reasons, we come here hoping to find an open space, and we do find. If somebody comes to IIT Chennai, for example, IIT Madras, for example, they will find a place like Vannam. If they come to IIT Bombay, they'll find a space like Sati. If they go to even smaller universities now or smaller colleges, there are these small collectives, and I think Gourab is going to talk about them. I'm not going to dwell on that, but there are people like you that you find, because there is diversity in this campus. While you see many people who are not like you, you also find people like you, and that is what you are banking on. You come to the university looking for a space to be yourself. And when you come to a space which becomes very guarded, very restricted, then it becomes extremely difficult to survive in this space also. And a lot of articulation of people from the margins in higher education spaces that we've heard in the context of caste, in the context of gender, in the context of sexuality, all of them tell us of the inherent violence and discrimination in the system that exists. But beyond looking at the queer trans body, I also feel that when we speak of queering, then we also have to look at other things. Because once, and this is something that we've had in our conversations, that once you break one boundary, then there are many boundaries that can be broken. Once you've broken the boundary of a gender stereotype, you've broken that. Once you've broken the boundary of a sexuality stereotype, then you're open to looking at other things. And in an education space, I would say that how do you look at performance? How do you look at what is a good student and what is a bad student? This is a question now I'm putting to those who are part of those of us who are on the other side, those of us who are queer trans or straight people, cis straight people in the administration, in the faculty. What does queering mean to us? One is, yes, creating space for different kinds of queer trans individuals to be able to survive here. How do we change our regulations? How do we address their assimilation and their comfort? Not assimilation, their comfort in these spaces. Providing space for them to experiment, providing space for them to be able to be themselves. That's one of the responsibilities that we have as people who are on the other side. But more than that, there is in the present moment, and in my earlier remarks, I said till the 1990s, we had only the public university. Since then, we have a lot of private universities coming in. We find even public university becoming more expensive. Much more money is being spent by parents. And as the commercialization of everything around us happens, there's also a commercialization of education. There is a demand by the student as a client, or there's a control by parents over the children much more than what we had when we were younger. All these technologies which allow for us to be connected, which should actually help us build connections, have also become surveillance technologies. And so parents also have their own nature of surveillance. They're very committed to you succeeding. They're very committed to you performing well, which means that if you are taking part in student politics, then that would be frowned upon, not only by the parents, but also by the prototype teachers, prototype or proto-parents who exist as faculty on the other side. So you will have monitoring of, are you doing the job that you've come here to do? Which means do well in your studies. Everything else is not necessary in this understanding. In my understanding of education, and if I look back at my college life, if I look back at my years in IIT Bombay, I think that what I learned from my peer group, what I learned from everything else that I did along with my education is what I carry with me as preciously, sometimes even more preciously than what I carry the education that I got. So I think that the classroom education that I got. So I think that the higher education space is a space that we have to explore for multiple avenues to open for us. One is, as queer trans individuals, for us to find who we are, to find ourselves, to find our expressions, to find how we fit into the world with everybody else. Two, it is also to question, maybe I came into engineering because everybody told me that I needed to go into engineering. Maybe that is not what actually is my calling. Can I figure out other things to do? Can I find more responsible ways to be able to find other parts of me, which may not be my mainstay, but which is something that will give me joy in years to come? Can I become aware of the world by getting involved in student politics? I don't see educational institutions today opening us up to this. They're in fact clamping us in to become these people who come, study, and leave and not do anything else. And we know the recent incidents that have happened in IIT Bombay, which have led to fines on students. And I find it ridiculous that monetary fines can be put on students for such apparent violation of regulations. But that's again something that we're not going to touch upon. I think that when you're on campus, and these are my final 2 points, as students, when you're on campus, please take the opportunity to reach out to find other people who can help you grow more, who can help you learn how to build this solidarity. And so I like the fact that Chintabar and Vannam are doing this together, that you understand where the other person is coming from, and you also realize what is your responsibility as somebody who's not being marginalized in a similar manner. How do you stand in solidarity with this other person? How do you deal with difference? How do you deal with difference of eating habits? How do you deal with difference of belief? How do you deal with difference of politics? Is and a combative way the only way to do it? How do you deal with success and failure? Failure as important as success. How do you deal with these things? Is something that you will learn from each other, that you learn from seeing people around you. And I say this completely from what I learned by being in a hostel and being on a campus where regulations and restrictions were not so bad. So I totally recommend. And so then my recommendation for the other side, which is the administration and the faculty, is that how do you create a space? How do you create a space so that students become more aware, more respectable, more responsible, not respectable. They become more aware, more responsible, and more empathetic individuals. How do they understand the world with all its complexities much better? Instead of making them just good in their structural engineering, instead of making them just good in the equations that make higher energy physics make sense to me, how do I also talk about what are the circumstances within which science itself came in? And this is my last point, that how do, as a person teaching science, how do I start speaking about the history, sociology, and philosophy of science so that there is an understanding that no knowledge comes only from, falling apples and levitating in bathtubs. It comes from a socio-cultural location. And that social cultural location, as technocrats, as people who do science, we think we know it all, but we don't. We need to learn that. And how do we make all of this part of education in higher educational institutions? Education cannot be only me getting my degree. Education will have to be all of this. And this to me is also queering higher education. So yes, making space for gender and sexuality is one bit of it. Making space so that there is diversity around gender and sexuality, definitely very important. Something that we should have done long back, something that we are already lagging behind in. But also, how do we learn to be diverse, plural, respectful, and actually nurturing each other, being caring of each other? Thank you.
Shall I start? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Chayanika, for an amazing talk. It's always lovely to listen to Chayanika wherever she has spoken. I don't know if she has remembered me, but I grew up listening to her like from a young adult to now or whatever. I'm near 40 now. So from my MA days, I know Chayanika from 2006 onwards. I've been constantly listening and getting inspired. Also, I must say that as this is the Pride Month, as we are, as both Chayanika and I am in Bombay, and you guys are from all over India and situated in IIT Madras, In Bombay, we at least I have felt within the gay circle that there is this very rise of very hyper masculinist kind of a very toxic masculinist tendencies. I don't know how it is in the lesbian circle or trans circle, but in Bombay it is very much there, and I keep fighting with them. And so it is very important also to my gender, my preferred pronoun is he, him, they. I think Chayanika's is also she and her. So, but it is also important that in the Pride month, when we celebrate Pride, when we remember the global history of and the movement that is called Gay Liberation Movement, which started in the US and then spread across the world, it is important that we have learned how to mobilize ourselves, how to fight on the street from the feminists. So there is a tendency that LGBT movement or queer movement should be separated from feminist movement or from feminists activists. So this we have to be very much vigil and aware of, that we should not do this. As we remember the queer history, we should also remember the feminist history, and that is very important. And why it is important, I will come to that point as where Chayanika left, that the idea or the understanding of space, a space whom we call the second home or the alternative to home, our home, and which is our university campus spaces, especially residential campuses like IIT Madras, IIT Bombay, JNU, from where I belong from. So these are the spaces where we are nurtured, protected. We find it almost like a safe space for us. As Chayanika said, a lot of us are deprived by many ways in our family because of our sexual orientation, because of our gender. And so, and when we come to the university space, we not only meet like-minded people, faculty, staff, but they also almost act as our support group. So almost it is an alternative family. So it is important for us also then to understand that what is the idea of family. Is it the biological linkages which we would call family, or these alternative people who are in our alternative home spaces can also be called our family or alternative family? And that probably the law should, or the state should recognize that, yes, these are my family. If Chayanika and I stay together and we are not linked through blood, but if Chayanika says that yes, Gourabh is my family member, then it has to be recognized. So all these things probably need to be discussed, not only in courtroom, not only in academic or activist circle, but also in university spaces. Because as we keep saying, because I come from a very left queer feminist background, that you know that if politics decides our life, then we should decide our politics. So it is very important that you know that what kind of politics we should decide to decide our future. Now, I will keep it very short, that I think that I will talk in terms of three layers, that why a queer collective on a campus, you know, educational space is very important. Its relevance from the perspective of student, from the perspective of faculty now, because I also teach, and also a very important term which we use, but we should be very cautious while using it, is intersectionality. So why it is important to have a campus queer collective? Campus queer collective like Vannam. I don't know much about Vannam, but I'm sure that what Vannam is doing is amazing. And what a campus queer collective like Vannam, Hasrat in JNU, or Anjuman, the first queer collective in JNU, or Sathi in IIT Bombay, what they generally do, they create a space where queer students or queer individuals of the campus can come together, can find their own people, and don't feel left out, or don't feel that, oh, I am the only one who is like this. This is a feeling which is very lonely and very dangerous. When you feel that there is nobody like you in the society, so you must be the odd one and you must be not the right one. So it is important that these spaces create that kind of, you know, comfort zone where people can come. Now, we often say that coming out, of the closet. It's a term which we have taken from the Western understanding of closet, Western understanding of sexuality, homosexuality. But in India, we perform many ways, every day. So, and to be in the closet can be completely your decision, but it is, we all have to understand that, to be in the closet is probably not my right, like in the sense that there should be enough provisions for me to come out and express myself the way I am. Now, a collective, which is a group of individual, is what it does is that it generally creates that kind of solidarity, that kind of bonding. Now, in JNU, when we did the collective, Dhanak, the second collective, we also requested the faculty to come. Now, the faculties of JNU said it very clearly, queer and queer ally faculties, that we don't want to get into student space, because this space has to be for students, but we will be there to help you and protect you, because we know that the administration will not be very nice to you guys. And that's what happened to us during the first edition of Queer Film Festival, where the administration just refused completely. It supported, but then it refused. Now, why I'm using this anecdote? Because it is very important that any kind of recognition from the administration is important. We cannot go against the administration. We have to work with the administration. Now, and this is what I'm talking, when 377 was still not decriminalized. So when JNU's first Queer Film Festival, Satrang, was launched, and I got only 5,000 rupees through the film club, to support the film festival. That 5,000 is a very small amount, but it is a token amount, but it is also a symbol of the administration supporting a queer film festival on the campus. This the administration withdrew just a few hours before the last, the day before the festival, at 4:15 p.m. with a letter saying that I am doing something which is unethical, I am doing something which is criminal, and I am making JNU, I'm shaming, it's a very shameful activity that I'm doing. I'm not considering anything. So this was obviously came from both the VC and the registrar office, and they apologized to me next year. They said, we have been also got educated by our own colleagues. So which is also a very great thing. But that entire logic of getting that 5,000 rupees got completely lost. But I didn't lose that fight, because I kept on fighting. So this is very important, that how much you can push the administration to support you, any kind of recognition. Now, so this is the job of a queer collective. Now, queer collective's job is also that now there is a provision for transgender students. So there is a legal provision, but what about the social acceptance and awareness? So the queer collective, what I have done, and I think all queer collectives should do, is that systematically organize awareness workshops or awareness sessions, at least in a month. JNU, for example, JNU has different schools: School of Humanities, Languages, Social Sciences, Science, So apparently, if in these schools, if these workshops or awareness sessions were conducted, then what happens is that if they are conducted, then people will start the dialogue, that conversation would happen. Now, what happens is that also that one of the demands, and this is what I have been demanding, because dignity is a very important word. Dignity of life, that is, which comes with employment, but dignity is that the basic necessities of life, if you are getting it or not. That means whether the society is taking you seriously, your existence seriously or not, which is a very simple demand, that is toilet. So for a transgender person, do you have gender neutral toilet? You are probably all science people probably. So there is no gender to the toilet. Men and women use separate toilets, because if men know how to keep the toilet clean and flush, then women would not get, the chances of getting UTI would be very less. It's very simple. So, but now, as this is a kind of a common sense, civic sense and hygiene issue, so we have kept two different toilets. Now, the point is that if we have kept two different toilets, can we also have a third one for gender neutral? Many places have disabled toilets for disabled people, but can we actually squeeze somehow. It's a very simple thing, but it's a very important thing. Safdar Hashmi, a very fantastic theater artist. He had a very great play called Aurat. And there the leftist worker union asking for a lot of things. So one woman got up and said, I have a demand. And everybody laughed, all these men, and said, kya bolna hai? Why are you asking? Women don't have anything. We fight for you. We are male workers. She said, no, I still have a demand. They said, what? She said, can we have a toilet for women? Because we can't use the toilet that men use. We can't go there, and we have to hold our pee for 8 hours of work during factory hours, working hours. So these kind of small things, I think, is very important for a queer collective to put in their list of demands. Another thing is that about the hostel facilities. If today I, Gourab, go to IIT Madras and I recognize myself, identify myself as a trans person, you will put me in which hostel? Then you would force me to say that my pronoun or my identity will be male or female. So you'll either put me to a male hostel or a female hostel. Will there be a gender neutral hostel? Like many campuses have hostels for married students. Can there be a provision like that? JNU VC, who was very nice before, I know whom we should not name now, but so when Sir was leaving, Sir asked me that, Gourab, where is that proposal? You didn't get it, because he was very interested that what happens if a trans student comes? Where should we put that trans students? Because I told him that if you put a trans person in a boys hostel and the person says, I do not want to get into a boy girl binary, then why will I stay? Right? So these kind of things we need to talk. I don't know the solution, but we need to discuss, because through discussion it will come. The third one is that counseling is extremely important. JNU now has almost 8,000 plus students. We have only 3 counselors. We have 2 different kinds of students who come to JNU who are doing foreign language undergrads and then MA, MPhil, PhD. And they come from everywhere from the country. Very difficult that if you do not have counseling sessions, particularly for queer people. I used to go and give my blood to run the STD, STI center, blood testing center in JNU, because I think this is something government provision. If you do not get 30 samples a day or 30 samples a week, something, they will shut it down, and which they did. So, but I, being me, I obviously used to just catch hold of all people and say, just go and just check, because they need sample, they need data. So these kind of things, if you have a health center, do you have a condom vending machine? Do you have a sanitary napkin vending machine? Do you have a person who is dealing with STIs, STDs, who is dealing with mental health issues, which are probably stemmed out of maybe your own gender dysphoria or your any kind of sexual orientation? Do these campuses, they provide this kind of counseling support? We don't have, and we say that are hum counseling kar denge. Not everybody can counsel. We need experts. So this medical support, I think, is lacking very much in most of our campuses, also for quote unquote straight people. Another thing I would say, that which I have learned from my queer feminist activist friends, female friends actually, and particularly from Sappho also, and then little bit when I read about LABIA, is that queer collectives on campuses, because you all come from different parts of India, that is from with different linguistic background, it is to actually release your your collective's press release or any kind of literature in Indian languages, because it is very important. We read queer literature, queer politics, queer activism mostly in English. The activism has been restricted to urban spaces. Now it is now overflowing to mofushols or semi-urban places, but still not very much in rural places. Now there are different kind of Indian words for different identifying different kind of queer identities, personalities, traits, whatever. But it is important for us to coin new words, to get these words which are existing, and to see that how we can make queer literatures in Indian languages. That is only possible. We cannot have a translation center. Government has set up a translation center to give us certificates, which is completely nonsense. It's all coming to Hindi only, and we have to oppose it. But what is important is that if collectives can set up, for example, in Dhanak, we have decided that as we are functioning in North India, we'll do it in Hindi and English. So all our pamphlets, all our releases, all our support literatures, awareness literatures were written both in English and translation, and these were all done by us. It is a lot of work. We have study, but we also have the slogan study and struggle. So we have to do this. Now, the second part, which is about the teacher's part, I want to say is that how you can bring change when you are a teacher, or as a student, what kind of demands you can say. Now, I am not a science guy. I had science in 11, 12, and that's the end. But the point is that I don't know that I have understood and realized it that IIT very systematically has wiped out, history of science, as Chayanika said. I don't think you guys really read it as a subject, as a paper. You have certain courses from Humanities Center, novel, post-colonial theory, but not as a very as a compulsory thing that you have to do it. Now, even if you have post-colonial theory or novel courses or poetry, it is important for those faculties to to have queer representations in the syllabus, or to have a queer reading. For example, there is a poem like Goblin Market, during the Raphaelite period, pre-Raphaelite period. Now, people read it in many different ways. But when I teach it in the class, I do a very queer reading because it's a queer poem, Goblin Market, and you all should read it. It's about two sisters and goblins, It's a fantastic poem. Now, these are the things which as faculty members we should do it. What kind of literature we are, or what kind of texts we are giving to the students, what ways of seeing, ways of reading, and ways of understanding we are teaching students for a holistic study of the material. It is not restricted to sexuality also. It's also for caste, it's also for class, it's also to understand environment. So unless and until we do that, very consciously, we will not represent. It's not possible to represent every marginalized communities, but as much as we can, we should do it. Now, this is probably Vannam, Chintabar can put it to their faculties which are, I come from a very activist background, so I will tell you that you cannot change the world and you should not be a rebel instantly. You should do it very systematically. Again, thanks to Chayanika and Chayanika's all friends who taught me how to become a very nice, clever, intelligent activist, that you should take baby steps and get all those teachers first who are very supportive, who are your ally automatically, and bring these small changes. Now, this brings us to also scientific temperament. That scientific temper is very important. That I don't know that if Vannam and Chintabar together are doing exercises or like workshops or talk shows, like what Vigyan Manch does, is that about superstitious. I cannot really fathom it that IIT Bombay has a Goshala. It has a temple. Faith is very different, but when you have organized religion, it is dangerous, because then you are going against science, you're going against logic. So are you talking about how many women scientists have done it? You all know Madame Curie have won 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 different science fields, but how many of you keep on repeating it? Because sometimes it also goes in our popular amnesia. We forget it. So those kind of things, I think, very important that you do hand in hand with faculty. Call a faculty who can come and talk from your platform, so that you have to be also quite inclusive in the sense and quite wide and open, so that nobody should know that Vannam only talks about sex and sexuality rights, and Chintabar only talks about some progressive things. They also together provides a platform to many people to come and talk, because you are again a residential campus, and as Chayanika said, everything is very important, everything is connected to each other, it's a social context, so that we also have to understand. Now my last point is the intersectionality, which is very important, because you all know that that you are all in IIT campuses, and IITs are in news about its caste reservation, its caste atrocities, problems. Now the question again is coming that Chintabar, Vannam, are they constantly and organizations like Vannam and Chintabar, are they constantly having any dialogue with the Ambedkarite circles? Are you all having a kind of a discussion with the faculty mentors? IIT like campuses have appointed faculty mentors. It's a lot of interference that the administration does. It's not like JNU or other Delhi university colleges. As far as I know, that administration do interfere, look at your poster. These are the things which you have to also fight as collective. If administration tells we will not do it. Administration also told me that why don't you do a film festival on Rajesh Khanna, because Rajesh Khanna just died at that time. I said no, we will do something else. So those kind of small fights also you have to do. Now the question of intersectionality is that can we talk about LGBT rights without tribal rights? Can we talk about LGBT rights without minimum wage rights? Can we talk about LGBT rights, without environment or climate crisis? If you say that, yes, I am against patriarchy, then you also should say that I'm against capitalism. You should also say that, yes, I'm against all those policies which are cutting down trees and killing forest, and the global warming is happening because of that. If you do not ally with these marginalized groups and their movements and their fights, then probably your understanding or our understanding of queer is very different, because queer is not only a term which is associated with your sexual orientation or identity, but it is also a term which is political, which questions anything which is heteronormative, which is heteropatriarchal, which again goes against humanity and against environment, against nature. If we do not politicize the queer term, then probably our understanding of queer in a post Section 377 India and in this very much climate crisis world will be very much restricted. So there the intersectionality has to happen. And this is how this is on this note I want to end, that probably today's session, that Chayanika and I, whatever we told you, that you will remember that intersectionality is extremely important, particularly on a campus like IIT, where there are caste discriminations, gender discriminations are rampant. Thank you.
Thank you, Gourab Ghosh. Both the presentations were really amazing, and the insights were really helpful for both our organizations, Chintabar and Vannam. Now we open the panel for Q&A session.
So I have a question. Can I go ahead? Yes.
Yeah. Also, Anindya, one second. So if anyone has like you have questions, you can also type it. Meanwhile, we listen to others. Yes. Sorry, Anindya.
Yes. So first of all, thank you for the talk. It was really nice to actually hear about your inputs and stuff. So I was wondering one thing, especially when you're talking about the question of faculty, right? So how sometimes faculties are kind of like, okay, we a lot of faculties can basically be like, okay, even if they do know about queer shows, they're like, oh, we don't want to get involved in all of this, right? So I was kind of thinking about, when you talk about awareness raising programs in campuses, often a time we have this kind of, most of these campaigns are directed towards the student community per se, but we often fail. I feel that something we often prioritize less is that how, how there's this kind of student professor dynamic, how we kind of usually don't focus on that, right? So most professors are like, okay, we don't really care about this gender binaries, we don't care about this, that. So I was thinking, it's just a curious idea that I had, but I wanted to hear your views on it. That how about if faculty who are queer allies actually reached out to other faculties, and kind of tried to make them understand about these developments more than students directly approaching them? Because sometimes students do fear faculty. They may be like, okay, this might put me in a bit of a weird sore spot. So yeah, how would that be as an idea?
Okay. So, like for example, I'm a faculty, so I reach out to faculty whom I think will be potential queer allies. But I also reach out to faculty who are very transphobic or Islamophobic, and I shut myself up there. And I never reach out to them because I think it will be talking to the wall or a stone. So faculties do that, faculties who are like me, they keep doing that, so that we also need to create our own community and expand it. But I would say that if you know that a faculty, we can be your ally, but not really comfortable, there are a lot of other conditionings, so it happens. But let's say a faculty who is very interested to talk about chat GPT, AI, you create a platform where you call from Vannam, you create a platform to talk about chat GPT and ethical issues, or media issues. And the faculty talks. And then you say that, oh, wow, sir or ma'am, it was so good. Let's have chai. And then you talk a little bit about Vannam. Then you say that sir, it will be very nice if you can come again and talk to us. We are showing a film, called Gay India Matrimony. Will you please come and see it? It's very nice. And the faculty gets impressed and the faculty comes. So this is a long process. This is a kind of a social cultural activism you have to do, but then it's a long process. You have to spot and locate your allies. You have to keep on doing it. And as I come from a activist background, it is very important to train and create the next cohort or next batch. You will pass out after 4 years. You within that time you have to create your next batch. Who will do that? Because if a faculty has said yes, for example, my vice chancellor said no, refused to meet me. I was a very popular actor, but refused to meet me when the film festival was going to happen. Within 6-7 months, he sends me a long email by saying, I'm sorry, I have now educated myself. Now, if I leave the campus, there has to be someone who will keep that discussion, that dialogue with him. So it is very much important that you keep doing this activism, but you also create another set of activists who will keep on doing the work. So this much I can tell you, but Chayanika can tell you more.
So I think that there are usually faculty members who are allies and who do help. But there are 2 points that I wanted to make. One is that the gender cells that are there in campuses can be used for a lot of this work, because although they're made in the context of sexual harassment, their mandate is much larger. And we use that in the Bombay University, which is a very traditional university, but we used it a lot to educate teachers on their attitudes towards gender and sexuality in general. And that has been quite something that we managed to do, talk about every issue with them, which is difficult for students to do. And much of what I'm speaking is also coming from those conversations, because I think that a lot of faculty members are very conservative, and they don't have an openness to the world. Whether they are from science faculties, or they are from liberal arts, or they are from humanities. They're extremely conservative people, and their attitude to the normativeness of the world is, if it works for them, then they're happy with it. So how do you find cracks within that, and how do you expand that, is something that can be done with the gender cell, of course, provided there are some people in the gender cell who can take it on. But yeah, like Gourab said, you find the people who you think will help you and work with them. But the second is also a third category of people on campus that we constantly forget, and which is the non-teaching staff. A lot of our fights are also with the non-teaching staff, because the security guard who comes and tells you not to sit here, not to stand there, not to do this, not to do that. And that security guard, probably they get the brunt of our anger at that moment because they are acting on somebody's orders. A lot of times when campuses have them staying on campus, then there are other kinds of stressors that happen between these communities. And I really think that as faculty members, as students, we kind of forget that there's a whole system of care that operates through the non-teaching staff, which we ignore and don't pay attention to. And acknowledging them and building conversations with them is a very, very important part of acknowledging their contribution to our well-being on the campus. So I think we tried this in TIS. We did some conversations with the security guards, which are not necessarily that you change your worldview around sexuality, but it is also that how do you appreciate that there could be people with a different attitude to the world in the same campus as you are living, and that those conversations were useful. They worked to some extent. And I remember also when the Queer Collective in Tata Institute was trying to ask for gender neutral washrooms. One of the things that the authorities raised was that the cleaning staff will not be comfortable. And the Queer Collective, however, had already spoken with the cleaning staff, had explained to them what they were doing, and they already had a yes from them. So that was a good step from the Queer Collective to actually speak to them and include them in these decisions and in these demands. So I think that also one needs to keep in mind. Saurabh, I think there's a question for you.
Yeah, and adding to that, the non-teaching staff is very important. We also have to understand that most of them are also probably migrant workers. So, for example, in JNU, one non-teaching staff who came from a village in Bihar told me that, भैया आपके जैसे ही एक लड़का मेरे गांव में है. Very important, because for him, I am this openly queer person. And he probably will go back to his village and say that तुम्हारे जैसे एक सर है उधर. ठीक है, this kind of connection that they make is very important, because we also, that's why I said that creating queer literatures and awareness literatures in Indian language is very, very important. Now, Ashutosh asked me a question that, that what do I mean by carefully having intersectional politics, carefully crafting intersectional politics. Ashutosh, I'll give you a kind of an example. Let's say, a Muslim student group comes to me and says that, what is the condition of Muslims in this country? We are marginalized, blah, blah, blah. Please, these are our charter of demands. Will you please sign? I will sign. But before signing that, I will also ask them that, do you support queer rights? Or do you support that women should be allowed to use science labs till 10 p.m.? Or women hostel should also remain open till 9 p.m., 10 p.m. like boys hostels? And then they say no. Then I will not believe in that intersectional politics. Because you cannot then allow this kind so this is, then you say that, oh, then you are not supporting Muslims. No, I support Muslims, but I have to also understand that as I talk about a very popular stereotype of Islamic fundamentalism, there is something called Hindutva fundamentalism, there is something called Christian fundamentalism also. So fundamentalism and fascism is fundamentalism and fascism. It comes in different phases. I cannot compromise because apparently it seems that it is little bit marginalized fascist. So in that way, I will not do the intersectional politics. I will be very careful. But, and similarly, if, and this what we experienced when we were doing Delhi Pride March, that a lot of MNCs would come and say, we will give you money to do your poster making and everything, and and everybody wants money. We are students, we are activists, we don't have money, so much. But then we ask them that we have a demand, because Pride is also, in Pride Month, we are talking about Pride marches. Pride March or Pride Walk is also political. It is not only that we all dress up, look very beautiful, dancing. No, it is also about visibility. You have invisibilized me, I am visibilizing myself. on an open space, public space. Now this is my pride. This is the moment which I really proud of. Now this is a political movement. This is a political performance. There we also put demands. In that demand, we also put that do you pay women and male workers, male and female workers same? Do you have the minimum pay wage for all the workers that you have, or the government guidelines? Do you have Bishaka guidelines at workplace? If you don't have, then no, I don't want to have an intersectional political ally with you. I will not want your money, because then you are not set, and many MNCs won't sign it. Many MNCs will not have Vishaka guidelines, a notice board, Vishaka guidelines. This is our Vishaka guidelines. This is our internal complaint committee numbers. Contact us. They will have a short notice board which nobody will know. Then I will not want to have any kind of intersectional politics with them. And this is what I mean by being careful. I hope I answered it. You have said something, Ashutosh, but it can be interpreted as that we are making transactional, not necessarily saying so. No, not solidarity transactional, but it's a common understanding that that I will ally with that person whose politics ally with my politics. There can be a Hindutva fundamentalist and a Islamic fundamentalist who can go hand in hand together, which they have done in the court by saying that same-sex marriage should not be granted. So they have intersectional politics, no? They have done a very transactional politics in that way. They have come together. I will not go with that. And that has happened on JNU campus. Muslim student outfit has come and said support us, but very openly said homophobic comments. Very openly said that we do not think that homosexuality is normal. Transsexual, we understand. We understand transgenders, we understand. They are hijras. For them, transgender means hijras. We accept them as part of culture, but homosexuals are abnormal, medically challenged people. They need to be treated. So when a person is saying this, how can I say that, okay, I will collab with you or I will be on the same platform with you? That is probably not. But yes, when fascism is thousand-headed hydra, then probably sometimes we have to also forget this and hold hands together, where the Gadbandhan happened in the general election, which showed result. From 400 se 240, we have seen it. So at some point we have to do it. But in queer politics, let's be a bit careful and let's be more vigilant. Any other question? Chayanika is very sweet. I'm not very sweet. I look sweet, but I'm not sweet, and I'm a teacher. All of you have switched off your camera. This is exactly what we experience when we teach online. At least you should switch on your camera for 10 seconds so that Purnima from Vannam, so we can all have a picture screenshot. I don't know how to take it, so someone has to take it. Do you want?
I have a comment to make on what you said, Gourab, and to what Ashutosh said. That I would not be. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and when you're saying that our politics, when you make the comparison with the MNC, it is understandable to me. That a multinational corporation who is trying to use the Pride March for something, for building a brand for itself, my conditions are very different. Whereas if it is somebody from a marginalized background who is being attacked on campus, then I cannot be. At that time, solidarity has to come to me whether or not they extend the same solidarity to me. And I think that feminist politics over the years has moved to where it has in terms of supporting queer trans lives, because one continued to ally with the women's movements, even in the face of, way back in the 80s and the early 90s, we had questions of whether it is normal, abnormal, etc., etc. And one has worked with that over a period of time. And one hopes to work with allies. One hopes to work with people who, in my understanding, are structurally similarly marginalized. So in my understanding, in present day India, a Muslim community is marginalized by the same heteropatriarchy, Hindutva driven heteropatriarchy as I am. And this I see. So I will support it even if they don't see it similarly at this moment of time. But a person who is queer and trans, queer or queer trans, but is rabidly supporting a Hindutva government today is somebody that I do not ally with. Because they may be queer and trans, but they are completely taking a very normative position and a very violent position towards many others in this country. And so I would not stand with them for many reasons. So yes, I think I take your point. I take a point of also thinking through our own politics as we make these solidarities.
Yes.
And building a politics along with it. And so that the politics has to grow to include all structures of oppression, and it has to connect with the other marginalizations. And yes, it has to push others to also recognize us as being marginalized by the same structures. But yeah, I mean, like you only said that the present, I mean, I have worked for the last 8 months in Maharashtra for the elections, working with the Shiv Sena, and what it does to you internally is a different story. But you work with it because there is some little niche from where you hope that there can be some hope for all of us.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. And yes, I also cannot be with a trans person who is overtly Hindutva or supporting Hindutva politics. I cannot be allied with that person. But yes, with any other religious community person who is transphobic or queerphobic, I can still have the hope that there will be possibility of change, transformation, some kind of this thing, which also Tamil Nadu has a history of left activists entering the temples with the Dalit activists by saying that they should all enter the temple. Though probably many of them will also be atheists, you know. So yes, if there is a question of oppression, we have to stand together, and then you can keep on having more dialogues. I always believe, and this is what I've learned from Chayanika and others also, you should not stop talking. You know, there are a lot of moments when you will feel very depressed, very much saying that what the hell is happening, you know, nobody's understanding it. But yes, you need to keep on talking to people, explaining them, and be patient, you know, because it's a long fight and we should sustain and survive long to keep on going with the fight. So yeah. Any other question?
I actually don't have a question, but just a comment to make in line with what you were saying also. I think also something that, this kind of fear that pervades most campuses about queer collectives, or, when people raise awareness about queer rights, is also this kind of, I think this is kind of anxiety that goes on about how these are Western concepts, and how this Puritan need to keep Indian campuses Indian. You don't want to introduce stuff like this. You don't want to acknowledge queer people. So I feel something that is also something which is politically used to kind of prey on those latent fears, that somewhere you're disrupting power structures when you're talking about empowerment and acknowledgement for queer rights.
Yeah,
I think
that's again we have to keep on talking, because India is an ancient nation. It's a Sanatan nation, and queerness is very Sanatan. The
exactly.
moment human beings were born, they are all queers only. There were no straight human beings. We are what time ho gaya hai तुम्हारा, पर love jihad हो गया है तुम्हारा. But then we have to accept that we have to keep on talking again, because it's not a Western term. Probably closet is a Western term, but look at our marriage songs, look at our rituals, very queer in many ways. So when we say queering higher education, we have to probably queerize Bharat also,
Right. because this is something that I've noticed when you're talking about like the history of things, right? So a lot of people often have very distorted histories in their minds, So people have this idea that, oh, there's nothing called queer in India. Okay, India has always been about men and women. But a lot of people don't often realize how much our mythologies, our stories, our religions have so much of queerness involved in them. So I
The,
think that's
the most
introducing that.
yeah, the most pure water in India available is Ganga, and Ganga was brought by Bhagirath, and Bhagirath was born out of two lesbians.
Right.
So yeah, so then then we are very much queer. Ganga is probably also queer. Okay, so do you have any other question? Then we should take a photo. Okay, who is taking it? You have to say 1, 2, 3. Done? Done? Or you're waiting for others to join? Devan, Deepika, Ashwin Dev, Alina, Rahul. This is exactly what I do in my class.
You're not a very good ally, I'm sorry.
Okay. Who has taken?
I took a few screenshots.
Okay, great. Okay. Yes, Chayanika.
I'll do the reverse. I think I have a question for the audience.
Yeah.
I don't know how to ask it because I don't know who will answer it. But I really want to understand that when you, maybe the Chintabar people can answer this question better. That when you use terms like queering higher education, what do you have in mind? Are you looking at specifically your campus and what needs to be done on it? In which case, the kind of things that Gourabh said, do they help you articulate demands? Or is it a larger question to Chintabar in terms of understanding education itself? Where are you coming from? Since we didn't have a preparatory discussion, we can use the space. As a small group, so we can just have a kind of discussion. Anyone?
I think I'm Akhil, by the way, and very good conversation and panel discussion. I really enjoyed it. As a member of both Vannam and Chintabar, I could say that for me, one thing I wanted to like engage with is currently how not just the popular sentiment, but obviously the law itself is being very hostile to both academic criticism or dissent, but at the same time also towards queer life. So you have the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita being very queerphobic and not recognizing violence towards queer persons. And at the same time, you also have charges of UAPA being very arbitrarily used to suppress academic dissent. So these are things that are also we as students of IITM are also experiencing or are always constantly lingering with the threat of, especially IIT is a campus that needs to have for any student body like Vannam or Chintabar, we need to be officially recognized and we need to have like very official channels of operation in order to not be, unrecognized by the campus. Or so it's a very rigid structure or rigid environment to work in. So how do one thing that I really wanted to understand was how they could be. So Chintabar's focus is in a way very um, uh, very left oriented and very student oriented, and a very broadly social economic factors are considered, while Vannam is again student oriented but also very queer oriented. So how do we bring those intersectional solidarities like we mentioned? So, and with NEP 2020 and with Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, how with both the administrative and also the popular or demographic sentiments being very queerphobic and also very, you know, hostile to the working classes. This is how do we build as students, as scholars, as people in the education sector? How do we build an intersectional solidarity? Also, in the context of being IITM students, was something that I was really interested in. Something that I think we did, in fact, talk about during the panel discussion.
Thank you for that, Akhil. So I'm very happy with the way that you've put it, to look at both, I mean, education as a space and the ways in which it is, in fact, going against the dream of independent India. That on the one hand, privatization in the way that it's moving and the ways in which it's excluding so many more people from getting access to higher education, and privatization happening at a time when a whole generation of marginalized groups were ready to enter the education system. I think we did, as part of one of the fact findings or one of the reports that we came out as PUCL, was on after Dr. Payal Tadvi's death by suicide in a medical college here. And as we looked at it, and I speak of it because it is relevant to the NEET controversy as we are seeing it unfolding. The ways in which these examinations and the ways in which privatization itself has worked against engineering and medical education, and the ways in which it is making it more and more difficult for people from the margins to come in. And then, in that context, to bring in the queer persons, who are coming from, some of them are coming from the margins, but a lot of them are also coming marginalized within their own communities. So it's a strange location from where the queer and trans people are coming to the space. I know of many of my respondents in the different studies and friends also who have managed to get higher education through their individual, hard work. There was no support from family or community. They managed because they were dedicated to getting education, and they managed to get it. And they got it at a time when it was possible to do it. I think it's becoming more and more difficult because of the ways in which education is becoming expensive and inaccessible for many of us to come in the same manner. And so I really appreciate this, that we look at the margins, and we look at the attack on all margins, while we also look at what it means to queer and trans people. And yeah, the second point that somebody raised, that how do we make it more comfortable for queer and trans people to be on campus? That's definitely the first step. But yes, from there we move towards seeing how we accommodate, how we create a space where, and in the present environment where the normative is becoming more and more congealed into a very violent and authoritarian normative. In that moment, how do we bring in voices of dissent, and how do we bring in voices of queering? Because queering, as we all use most of the time, is querying means questioning the normatives of all kinds. So querying, by its very definition as a verb, when we use it, it has to be against the present day political scenario. So yeah, thank you for that answer.
Yeah, I think that's all then. It was really amazing conversation. Like, we had a really insightful discussion here, and I thank you all for joining, and thank you Chayanika Shah and Gourab Ghosh.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.